program.
Thank you, Lois.
Thank you, Lee.
Is there a picture there? In Papua New Guinea, she was affectionately known as Mrs. Queen, and you can see why. In Papua New Guinea, she was affectionately known as Mrs. Queen, and you can see why in that picture there. Will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. After the death of Queen Elizabeth, Justin Welby, Archbishop of Canterbury, wrote these words. As a faithful Christian disciple and also Supreme Governor of the Church of England, she lived out her faith every day of her life. Her trust in God and profound love for God was foundational in how she led her life, hour by hour, day by day. In the late Queen's life, we saw what it means to receive the gift of life we have been given by God, and through patient, humble, selfless service, share it as a gift to others. Her late Majesty found great joy and fulfillment in the service of her people and her God, whose service is perfect freedom, for giving her whole life to us and allowing her life of service to be an instrument of God's peace among us. We owe her a debt of gratitude beyond measure. The late Queen leaves behind a truly extraordinary legacy, one that is found in almost every corner of our national life, as well as in the lives of so many nations around the world, and especially in the Commonwealth. Let us pray. Gracious God, hear our thanks for Elizabeth, our late Queen, blessed by grace, resolute in service, modest in person, for the years of her reign and the sweep of history through which she provided both anchor and springboard. We thank you for her dedication to the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. and for all the rich gifts of wisdom, kindness, and inclusion she brought to her long decades. We give you thanks for lives her life touched, for the radiance of her smile and the encouragement of her words. We thank you for the sparkle of her humor that eased the tensions she encountered, and for the determination of her life to see its duties through. Hear our thanks and comfort all who mourn for her, especially her family. We pray through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Let us stand for a moment of silence, and then we will sing the hymn, which will appear up there. The hymn was sung at her funeral. Let us sing.
Thank you very much, Dean. now, as we continue with our meeting, I'd like to ask our archivist, Angela Schilling, to say a few words.
Excuse me. Hello, everybody. You probably all know me, but if we haven't met yet, I'm Angela Schilling, the Collections Archivist from the Lutheran Archives. Thanks for coming tonight, and thanks to all the people out there in the ether. It's very exciting to have our first live stream. And we've got Ben and John on the tools tonight, so can everyone give a big thanks to them, because it's quite daunting, but they did so well in putting their hands up for the first one ever. So if anything goes wrong, it's their fault. No, that's not true. But so just a couple of things I wanted to tell you about tonight on behalf of the archives. We're having another book fair because the first one went so well. The next one's going to be on December the 3rd, which is another Saturday from, I think, 9 till 1. So come on down to the archives and tell your friends. There's going to be lots of things for sale and lots of people to meet and things to talk about. The archives is going to be closed to the public for all of December and all of January. So just to note that if anyone needs urgent access, they can do so by appointment for people who need to come in from interstate or anything else like that. And the other thing is that we're going to do something different with the archives, and we're going to open up the access to the research room. We're no longer going to charge people to come in. We're going to ask for donations instead. There's a couple of reasons for this. It's to alleviate a bit of admin, but also to try and make it more accessible. Hopefully get some more people in. So if anyone asks, that's going to be what's happening from October. That there are no more fees for the reading room for the archive. And I think that's it. So thanks, Lois.
Thank you, Angela. Good news from the archives there. And on behalf of Friends of Lutheran Archives, I would like to invite you to one more meeting. That is the people who are within reach of Adelaide. Our next meeting, the AGM, on the 27th of October, will not be live streamed. We have an AGM beginning then at 7 p.m. And we'd urge you to, if you are a member, to be punctual for that meeting, if you possibly can, because we need to put to you and have you vote on a revised constitution for Friends of Lutheran Archives, as well as our normal AGM business. And after that, at 7:30, there will be our final guest speaker for the year. It is now this next month, 100 years since the death of missionary Karl Strelo from Hermannsburg. And to commemorate that event, Pastor Rob Borges will be leading us through the story of Hermannsburg Mission from the beginning, the very first missionaries, and Kempe, Schwarz, and Schultz, thank you. And they're beginning with their work on the Aranda language, then going through the work of Karl Strelo, learning the language to a monumental degree, using his language to understand the culture, and beginning to train the indigenous people in leadership, going on through the time of Pastor Albrecht, following him again, encouraging the progress to indigenous leadership and indigenous congregation, which is the situation now, amongst which Pastor Rob Borges has been working for many years in Central Australia. So a very suitable story to set the context of Karl Strelo's mission work in that story, complete story of the mission. Well, not complete, it is continuing as an independent congregation of the church at Hermannsburg and many places beside. So that is our next meeting, and you're all invited to come to that. It would be a great pleasure for us to see you here on the 27th of October. Now to turn to this evening's meeting, Heidi McLeod's book to be presented to us, her novel telling the story of her grandfather, Pastor W.W. Fritsch, and focusing on parts of his younger life. But yes, she will tell you about that. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy it very much. I would like to ask Kim Wallant to come forward, please, to introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everyone. I've known Heidi for more than 40 years. She and her husband Alex are treasured friends of my wife Jan and mine, and Jan and Heidi are first cousins. Heidi is intelligent, thoughtful, articulate, caring, energetic, and fun-loving. Little wonder she has been able to sustain a long secondary teaching career. Little wonder that she and Alex have been foster parents to numerous children. As we've heard, Walter Fritsch was Heidi's grandfather. His remarkable early life and World War I journey have always been known in part by the Fritsch descendants and their families. But to record the story for posterity in a way that resonates 100 years later takes the emergence of someone with vision, skill, enthusiasm and commitment. Enter Heidi, with her idea to write the story in the style of a novel. In this, her first book, Heidi provides a compelling, heartwarming narrative of her grandfather's experiences that stands as a tribute to him and all who endured the non-military hardships of World War I. Heidi's enormous effort of research, writing, and determination to achieve publication is commendable, and the result is Wilf. Please welcome Heidi McLeod. She's going there, right there.
Thank you, Kim. That was wonderful. And thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Thank you to the committee for inviting me to speak. The name Wilf is the middle name of my maternal grandfather, Pastor Walter Wilfred Fritsch, a name that he used for himself when he wrote his own journals. One of them is From Plough to Pulpit. So I adopted Wilf for the book. Yeah, there we go. My talk, I can't see it, has it gone? The cover, okay. My talk traces the origin and some of the research and writing details of the book, an outline of the story within it, and ends with some family legacy. The PowerPoint will occupy the screen, and you'll notice a few twists and turns in its sequencing, but that's entirely consistent with Wilf's own story. Very little ran smoothly, and almost nothing ran to plan. The book stands firmly as a tribute. I'm trying to move it on. Next. Okay. The book stands firmly as a tribute to these two men, Pastors Fritsch and Doehler. However, it wasn't intended to be just that. It was and is a recounting of a most remarkable period of World War I that most people have never heard of. I just wanted to share Grandpa's experiences. I didn't expect to include a major secondary character. However, it quickly became evident that John Doehler must take his rightful place in the story. And so we commemorate this passage of his life too. I'm going to begin with my own acknowledgements from the back of the book. Profound gratitude is due to Walter Fritsch, Wilf, and John Doehler, who kept diaries of their internment in Ruhleben, and to their families who preserved the diaries and translated the material that was written in German. Priceless letters written by Fritsch and Doehler have also been preserved by their families and provided invaluable assistance in the composition of the manuscript. Sincere thanks to the Fritsch and Doehler families who have maintained and supplied various documents and family records. I'm thankful for the journals and booklets written by Wol and Till Fritsch for the benefit of their family members, as well as the stories told by them to me and others directly. To Lutheran Archives, Bowden, South Australia, deep gratitude for the collections of material on Pastors Fritsch and Doehler. Further thanks for the Ruhleben collection, containing invaluable primary sources from their terms of internment. Documents and photographs of the most surprising, informative, emotive, and revealing content brought back by Fritsch and Doehler made the telling of this story authentic in its detail. Heartfelt thanks to my husband Alex McLeod, my parents Robert and Eunice Patterson, nee Fritsch, family members, my editor Ian Hauser, and dear friends, all of whom encouraged, read, suggested, discussed, and enthusiastically supported me in the production of the manuscript. Thanks also to Greenhill Publishing of Port Adelaide, who so seamlessly turned the manuscript into a book. Now, here's one of these deviations that I mentioned. Yep. The idea of writing a book was born out of a trip to Germany that we did in 2009 when we visited the town where my grandmother's mother, Matilda McLeod, was raised. She came out to Australia to marry a young German pastor, Gottlob Simpfendorfer, who had settled in the Albury-Wodonga area of New South Wales to minister to recently migrated Lutheran Germans. With our hosts, my second cousins, Alex, our daughter Bron, and I stood right in front of their old home in the town square of Metzingen, where Matilda's father, a Kirschner, had his shop on the ground floor. A Kirschner deals in accessories like gloves, braces, caps, walking sticks, etc. Long ago, the shop alongside Mr. McLeod's belonged to a man who made and sold lingerie. His name was Heinrich Boss, whose son Hugo eventually took over the shop and became very famous. The town of Metzingen is now an outlet centre for the rich and famous who come to stock up on the new season fashions. However, standing there, we marvelled at the idea of a young German lass leaving everything and everyone dear and familiar to journey across the world to an unknown land, marry a man to whom she'd only been engaged for a few months, and create a new life. I thought there's a pretty good story there that probably should be told. When we came home, I retrieved the old booklets that my grandmother had written for the family. I started a document on the computer, the beginning of a story, with a vague but very blurry vision of writing a book. I named the file the novel Ha Ha Ha, which still sits on my computer today. Whilst rereading Grandpa's 2 booklets, also in the pile, I realised there was a more dramatic story lurking in those faded pages, a thicker plot, a cast of fascinating characters, a story spanning 6 countries of the world during one of the most turbulent eras of world history. That story demanded rebirth, and Australia needed to hear it. Grandpa's writing style was inaccessible to many modern readers, and the content was marked by brevity and understatement. But I started making some notes and forming ideas, soon facing the fundamental dilemma. Do I fictionalise it as a narrative based on a true story, or do I actually write the true story? I really wanted to write the true story, but not as a conventional biography. However, Grandpa's and Grandma's modest productions just didn't hold enough information. That decision was too hard, and I dabbled in a bit of documentation without real intent. A year or so later, at our regular Fritsch relatives get-together, my cousin Christopher Guntner and Skye produced a box of documents. Auntie Mary, Chris's mum, had recently died, and in sorting through her things, they found a box containing material from Grandpa Fritsch. A diary from his war prison days. Is it there? A bundle of letters written whilst in prison. Another bundle written whilst in America. Diaries from the farm and diaries from his ministry. They wondered if anyone wanted it. This was the moment where fate, or in my opinion, the Lord, stepped in and declared, "Come on, you're going to do this." So I took it. It didn't happen quickly. The first thing I had to do was read all this material. When you glance at the letters, which are actually out on the table, you'll understand how daunting that was. All written in faded pencil, in very neat, legible, but tiny cursive. As I read and read, I saw things this way. Grandpa had drawn the outline of an enthralling picture. Maybe 100 years later, I could colour it in. Then came the heavy weight of words such as integrity, authenticity, accountability, especially accuracy. If it's a true story, I can't colour outside the lines. My other dilemma was that I'd only known Grandpa when he was an old man. And the Wilf of this story was young, energetic, strong, and handsome. How could I shed the shackles of his old age and rediscover the boy? We loved our Grandma and Grandpa. I think I skipped one, right? We loved our Grandma and Grandpa and spent a great deal of time with them over the years. Here's some cousins are singing, "There is a gentle gardener," to him for his 70th. In my teens and early adult life, he was in his 80s and reached 92. I wasn't sure I could write from his perspective when he was just a lad and a young man in a previous century. I was not going to write in the first-person voice. I could never be him, but I was determined to write through his eyes and document only what he saw, heard, and did. My starting point was to read each letter from letter 1 and type it out. The problem was, letter 1 was written in German. A dear friend from the church, Gunther Stark, translated it for me, and so began my writer's journey, shared with a team of key and minor players, and some here tonight. Letter 1 appears verbatim on page 104, and other letters, or the content of other letters, are scattered throughout the text. I visited Lutheran archives, discovering Grandpa's box, with most of the information there relating to his later years of ministry. However, at that visit, Andy Thurlow appeared at the archives with copies of his most recent book and told me about an editor that I should hire, Ian Hauser. That made it all sound very professional. However, the friendship developed with Ian. His professional and personally encouraging contribution is a huge factor in my successful completion of the work. Is that, oh, the letters from America, yep. At the time, my teaching job at Sacred Heart took precedence, of course, along with the normal flow of daily life, so the typing of letters was a school holiday activity and spanned at least a year until I came to about letter number 28 and just couldn't do it anymore. But by then, some mystical morphing, some strange thing had happened. I was starting to inhabit the world of young Wilf, and thoughts would come to me which I wanted to write, but to stay true, I wasn't sure I could include them, until time and time again I would find these same thoughts, sometimes even the very same words and phrases in the lines of letters much further on. I'll give you an example. When Pastor Doehler, who's named Professor Doehler in the book, the principal of the German college, announced the outbreak of war, which is the opening passage, the college closed overnight, and young German students were sent immediately to become active soldiers. Germany had already assigned its young men into the military, and they had their regiments in preparation for war. But until that day, they were permitted to continue their civilian life. And now, as each one left the college to become a soldier, the Australians sadly bade them farewell, which eventually left only the Australian lads behind at the college and one last German fellow. Wilf, Doehler, and the third Australian, Willy Reuter, were also being separated early that morning into different work assignments. Wilf wrote about saying goodbye to each other and to their last German friend. And as was customary on such an occasion, they sang a hymn. Visualizing this poignant moment, Wilf still in his bedclothes, Doehler and Reuter dressed for travelling, and their German friend standing by, I wondered which hymn they sang. With my reasonable memory of good Lutheran hymns, I thought of a few possibilities. The one that kept recurring was our confirmation hymn, Jesus Lead Thou On. But I didn't dare name it for the sake of authenticity. Much, much later, when reading Wilf's letters from America, he referenced that particular hymn with the quote, "The one we sang with Henschke at Neuendettelsau." My heart skipped a beat. Now I could go and name it. Things like that happened quite often. I'd be scouring more letters, usually ones written after the war from America, not typing them out anymore. And I'd discover a wonderful detail, and I'd run, or actually walk quickly, into the lounge to Alex and say, I've just found out the names of two of Wilf's horses, Sandy and Star. Or Wilf just recounted an incident that happened on their wagon trip. Sometimes it was rather an oblique reference, and Alex and I would have fun fleshing it out with as much accuracy as possible. I must say that frequently I have taken author's license to colour in conversations and scenarios, even names here and there to brighten things up, but everything here did happen. The letters are a great mix of information, thoughts, hopes, cravings for news of home, humour, and deep love for his family. The letters never revealed self-pity. The one that I'll read now a little bit from is a typical example. He begins by thanking everyone at home for the food parcels. Now, I mustn't forget to tell you of the other Australian greeting that we received this week. It was a concrete one from the Central Queensland Patriotic Fund and consisted of many delicious foodstuffs, several fine big cheeses of which we received about 2.5 pounds. Then there was corn flour, tinned beef, pineapple, condensed milk and dripping. Yesterday, Doehler made a blancmange with the corn flour, so we invited Kashadi down and celebrated Myrtle's wedding with bread and cheese, with blancmange and preserved pineapple for dessert. Doehler gave me a nice little pepper bottle as a present for her. It was a day after the wedding, but that doesn't matter. I just wonder whether you would like some news. Well, the newest thing is that things here are practically the same. Only lately it has been very cold for spring. I would have done with those socks that Ma knitted and which she thought could not be sent, but anything can be sent if it's packed well and furnished with the same address as the letters. Perhaps put prisoner's comforts on. I don't think that you need to pay anything on it. And I also have a cold, but that is nearly better. But my eyes are pretty sore. I don't know if they got sore from the cold. However, if they don't improve, I will have to go to the doctor, but that will cost money. My word, I can't find any more news, but I do love to receive a lot of news from home. My mouth does water when I think of you eating grapes. I hope you have a good crop. How are the orange trees? How are the chooks? Have you still got them in the big yard? How are the rabbits? I suppose they died out. How much did our men clear back there by the 60-acre? How are prices of different things? How many horses are you working? What are the buggy horses like? And when will the war be over? Correct answers, please. Now, with love to you all, I close. May the Lord of peace and grace give patience to you all and to your loving son and brother, W. Fritsch. It's no secret that Wilf and Doehler survived the war, but the suspense and intrigue in the story lies in the astonishing places, people and experiences they faced, and the things that gave them the stamina to fulfill their original goals, despite the relentless and various obstacles put in their way. Part 1, I'll just give you a moment to read that quote. A portion of this part of the book addresses Wilf's formative years. Child number 8 in a family of 15, 2 of these died in infancy, and in time, Edward and Ernestine Fritsch fostered 2 orphans, Myrtle and Norman. They had so many children they couldn't fit them all in one photo. So these are Wilf's brothers and sisters. They were a farming family of the Wimmera region in Victoria, but eventually trekked north to a new and bigger property outside of Temora in New South Wales called Woolshed Farm. Wilf, then 16, what did I do? Okay. That's some horses. And the new tractor that Jack bought. The horses in the background wondering on what on earth it is. Whoops, oh gosh. I want the little map. Is it back? Hey? Yeah. Oh, we're way in advance. Maybe. Okay, that's. Oh, Woolshed. The map? Right. Okay. Wilf, then aged 16, and two of his older brothers. Oh, this is not going well. Back. Right. Wilf, then aged 16, and two of his older brothers, Jack and Harry, transported all the family's belongings on 3 large wagons, driving one each pulled by 2 mighty draft horses and each towing a spring cart behind. This adventurous journey of approximately 500 miles, when roads were merely tracks, spanned a period of at least 10 weeks and features significantly in my grandfather's memoirs. There's no doubt it was instrumental in his formation from boy to man. In the narrative, a mere 32 pages illuminate Wilf's childhood, family and youth, including the epic wagon track and life on Woolshed Farm. But anyone undertaking a character study will recognise the importance of these years and these pages. Wilf's attachment to his family is palpable, and the decision to leave the farm was born of an irresistible calling to the ministry. It's evidenced through his memories, his memoirs, and even his later letters, that his confidence in his own abilities wavered. And so leaving the security and familiarity of the farm was momentous. Having made that decision to become a pastor, Wilf arrives at Emmanuel College as a mature age student, aged 20, bigger than all the other students and some of the teachers. At Emmanuel, he met John Doehler and Willie Reuter, among others, and after matriculating at the end of 1913, they had to further their theological studies overseas, either in the USA or Germany. Okay, so they landed up at Genoa and trekked to Neuendettelsau. The narrative returns to Neuendettelsau, Germany, where it started at the outbreak of war. And as we trace the fate of these young Australians caught up in the catastrophe, we acknowledge the non-military experiences of thousands of civilians now registered as enemy aliens in a country at war with their own. In terms of Australian history, we're revealing events virtually unknown, and we're acknowledging the experiences of thousands of people overlooked in the customary commemorations of World War I. What's that one? Right. The mission house at Neuendettelsau, known as the Theological College in the book, was managed under the wise guardianship of Pastor Doehler, referred to as in the book as Professor Doehler. The college closed immediately after declaration of war, and as said before, many of its German students were ordered to take up their military assignments within 24 hours. This left Wilf Doehler and Willie Reuter stranded, ordered to register at the local police station and await instructions to supervised work assignments. Reuter was assigned to a milliner's workshop, Doehler was assigned to a military and civic hospital, and Wilf was assigned to a farm nearby at Jakobsruhe. I just want to acknowledge something regarding John Doehler. He was the youngest of the Australians, aged 19. He was assigned to a hospital at Ansbach as a nurse. The very next day after arriving, he was assisting in the surgical theatre with amputations. Wilf's farm, Jakobsruhe, meaning Jacob's Rest, was located with one of Neuendettelsau's numerous institutions of mercy, where deaconesses nursed and tended to patients of all descriptions and needs who had nowhere else to live and required special care. The Jakobsruhe house accommodated patients, but was also the main farm producing for numerous other institutions around the town. Wilf was appointed as manager of the farm. Part 1 traces his time on the farm, August 1914 to January 1915. There was very hard work, but great happiness at Jakobsruhe. But that ended on Tuesday, February the 9th, 1915, when Wilf was arrested. Wilf endures a grueling and humiliating 10-day train journey under guard, locked in prison cells along the way, transported from Neuendettelsau towards Berlin. The only bright spot along the way is his reunion with Doehler, who's also been arrested, and a third man, Stanley Morris, from New Zealand. They arrive at Ruhleben on a Saturday in January. As I finished part 1, and there's another quote there, I received encouragement and feedback from family members and some selected readers. I sent it to Ian Hauser for feedback and editing and didn't have to wait long for his very positive response. But approaching part 2, which was always meant to be the centrepiece of the novel, the years in the Ruhleben camp, I was racked with uncertainty because I really didn't have enough material to write from. I also faced a huge shift in the tone and logistics of the story. Previously, I wrote of epic journeys, the boys, now men, on the move, crossing state and national borders, travelling through a vast range of settings. And now I had to write about 2.5 years where they didn't go anywhere. One single setting for all that time. I was very unsure about it. I went back to the archives. Enter Lutheran archives. I scoured the Fritsch and Doehler boxes, and in conversation with one of the staff, the name Ruhleben was mentioned. He said they had a box on Ruhleben and brought it out. This box held the treasure that I needed to proceed. A wealth of primary sources, most likely brought back or posted by Fritsch and Doehler, and possibly Johannes Fliel and Theo Kashadi, who were also in Ruhleben. I spent some hours and several trips trawling through it. I could have written chapters and chapters more on Ruhleben with the stock of sources available. You'll see some of them in the next slides. So part 2 can I describe it? Oh, can someone else read it out? I can't read that. Right. Well, okay. Oh, this is, yeah, you can't see the, that's the site of the camp. Okay, I'll just go from here. Part 2 tells the story of their internment for 2.5 years in Ruhleben, translated as rest life. It's impossible for me to sum up the Ruhleben years here. The place was extraordinary in many ways, and the chapters detailing it do form the centrepiece of the text. There'll be a whole range of slides that'll be fairly quick soon, showing you Ruhleben and some of the life in there. But I'll just read this little part, synopsis first, of the Ruhleben period. 5,000 men, professionals, academics, artists, seamen, labourers, rogues and misfits lived cheek to jowl under irascible German guard. Wilf and Doehler endure hardship and humiliation for over 2 gruelling years, but grow in understanding of human nature at its best and worst, whilst witnessing the war from unique perspectives. Remarkable academic and cultural life unfolds in camp as prisoners employ their talents productively. Wilf and Doehler face significant moral dilemmas. Edified by faith, one another, their beloved Professor Deinzer through letters from home, an intriguing English mentor, and affable Aussie prisoners, they mature and they support others. So now I've reached this part where I think I can rest my voice and hopefully scroll properly through pictures of Ruhleben. It's a race course. It's the site of something like Morphettville or Victoria Park. You probably can't read that. That's just a more detailed map. You can have a look at it maybe online. They were in barracks that were converted stables, accommodated in horse stalls with up to 6 men in one horse stall. Details of all that are in the novel. What's that one? Okay, we're getting through them. Right. That's where the black seamen were housed in Barrack 13, away from white prisoners, and Wilf and Doehler were shoved in there on their arrival. Yeah, you can probably read that. Is that the tall man? Oh, the 3 of them. Not so happy. I missed the tall man. Is that him? Maybe I just stand down here. That would be better, wouldn't it? I need the gadget as well, like the dreaded gadget. Yeah, okay. Or I have to point it to there. I'm going to stand at the back. Okay. So these are some of the men of Barrack 13, thank you. As you can see, the camp is nothing like the horror camps of World War II, but still with significant deprivation. However, they made a life for themselves. There's the tall man. More than tall, I think. He's probably from a travelling circus or something like that, caught up like the others in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I'm just going to read this. Against all odds and expectations, World War I British civilian prisoners of war built a distinctive, multifaceted society on the site of Ruhleben Internment racetrack, outside of Spandau, Germany. Situated just 2 miles west of Berlin, the Ruhleben Internment Camp operated from November 1914 to November 1918. Over the course of these 4 years, the camp was temporarily home to more than 5,000 British male civilians between ages of 17 and 55. And in those years, the residents of Ruhleben, whose only common bond was their British citizenry, although there were Russians and others, became Ruhlebenites, who came together to improve their living conditions, govern themselves, and form athletic, cultural, artistic, and educational associations. And you can see that the Harvard Law School has some of this material. So this is from the internet, of course. Like detainees in other camps, Ruhleben prisoners had to deal with typical prison deprivations, substandard living conditions, boredom, lack of privacy, and restrictions in freedom of movement. Giving those facts, how did this remarkable community of men come about? As more than one former prisoner of the camp and various commentators have written, the men interned at Ruhleben had a choice to either regard their imprisonment as a tragedy or a challenge. I love this part, a tragedy or a challenge. As a group, they took the challenge and created clubs, teams, and associations that helped them focus their minds and bodies on something other than incarceration. In order to improve their living conditions, they worked with German authorities to take over administrative control of the camp and its services. In doing both of these things, the Ruhlebenites created a collective sense of purpose that guided them through their daily lives and assisted them in surviving, both mentally and physically, their imprisonment. Here are a few sources from the archives. I do like the coat of arms with the 2 rats. The orchestra, obviously drawn by a competent artist or sketcher. And the cast, of the gondoliers, the full cast, the Ruhleben Follies, and the document on the left is the front cover of the syllabus of the Ruhleben Camp School, which was given accreditation from London as an advanced tertiary institution, and the range of subjects and tutors and lecturers, all interned, is quite remarkable. And of course on the right we have the front cover of the Tercentenary Shakespearean Festival put on by prisoners, for prisoners. Here are some more personal documents. At the top left is Wilf's Ruhleben School enrolment card, a library card, I think. My favourite source of all is the John Doehler entry ticket into the 50-yard sack race. And the very official comment at the bottom, "This pass must be shown to enter the arena," etc. Things were very organised by the British. Of course, the German guards were there all the time looking on, and they let it happen. "You mustn't suppose that the camp was always like this," writes the author of this statement. "When the men were first brought here, the place wasn't fit to keep pigs in. All that you have admired in the camp, they themselves have created." Part 3. Just going back to my notes. Released in 1917 under supervision, Wilf returns to the Jakobsruhe farm before they proceed to England after the armistice. A quick word about the farm at Jakobsruhe. The relationships formed with the German farm workers and domestics, and a young boy who took to Wilf like a brother, and the deaconesses at the institution upheld Wilf before, during, and after his internment, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. The characters here contribute blessings of warmth, humour, and normality to Wilf, and enrich the story. My mother told me that Grandpa maintained contact with the sisters at Neuendettelsau for many years, and she recalls their family sending packages to Jakobsruhe during World War II, and also receiving the occasional Christmas package from those folk. In the chaos of post-war Germany, the three companions, now free men, wind their way north by train from Nuremberg to Berlin, a journey which provides a range of both humorous and heart-wrenching anecdotes. After a nervous sea voyage, they arrive in Hull on the Humber and travel to London. Confounded in dismal post-war London, they eventually acquire visas to the USA, arriving at the Lutheran Seminary in Iowa. Physically and emotionally restored, they graduate, returning jubilantly to Australia in 1920. This remarkable set of pictures was what they stepped out of Grand Central Station to find in New York. It's a display that the Americans put up. These great pyramids are formed out of the Pickelhaube helmets. There was all sorts of trading and purchasing of war memorabilia. And the Americans created this rather gruesome story for their fundraising to say that every helmet here belongs to a dead German soldier, which is Wilf and Doehler were very pleased to find out from a nearby person. Well, that's absolutely not true. That's just propaganda. But yeah, this display was there for months on the road outside the Grand Central Station. This is the seminary at Dubuque in Iowa. A lovely change for them. This is the class, graduating class from Dubuque in 1920, Wartburg Seminary. Doehler is the front right side, and Wilf is the back row, third from the left. As I mentioned before, Wilf was never really confident about himself as a scholar, and he was always very nervous when he passed in his assignments and essays. But on this occasion, the last essay he received back from his tutor had the words, "Of all the class of 1920, Wilf Fritsch has ploughed the deepest furrows." In fact, I was going to call the book Deep Furrows, but changed my mind. Wilf and Till married, and I've labelled them Generation 2. And to finish off, I've got a few photos here of the generations coming from Wilf and Till. Eunice on the left, Viola. At the back is Luthild. Next to Grandma is Roland, and then Mary, and then Garnett at the front. Along came some children, generations 2, 3, and 4 all together. The generation number is marked by generation 1 being the first Wilf's parents, both born in Australia. So I'm the little ones kneeling down on the left, and my cousin Jan, who's here tonight, is next to me at the front row, and then my two sisters, Joanne and Bronwyn, and other Schultz and Mitzi cousins as well. Whoops. Right, more grandchildren. Guy Smallacombe on the left, a couple more Schultz boys arrived, and that photo's taken, of course, at Grandma and Grandpa's house at Grant Avenue, and I think it's Auntie Mary's FJ out the front. And of course, Grandpa became very well known and most beloved at St. Stephen's, baptising, confirming and marrying many, many people. And this is just a photo of my brother Tim right in the middle, his confirmation, with his godfather Wal Alm. I'm not sure if any of you do know the Alm family. Uncle Wal, as we called him. Yes, that's right. He died fairly young, but he was Tim's godfather. And a sadder slide of my most beloved cousins. I've dedicated the book to Wilf and all who travelled his journey with him, and to my cousin Anthony Schultz and Greg Mitzi. Here's the next generation. These are Patterson grandchildren, and you can just spy Grandma in the middle there, surrounded by her great-grandchildren. Oh, Bailey Fritsch, goodness me. Yes, any followers of AFL football? Bailey plays for Melbourne, and I did discover that he is a relative, and you can see there he's the great-grandson of Wilf's youngest brother, Art. And I sent a copy of the book to the Melbourne Football Club via the hands of Mark Williams, who's a friend. And Mark wrote and said, Bailey's wrapped was the word, wrapped with the book. So I hope he reads it and draws some inspiration. This is the next generation. These two our grandchildren, young Fern and Logan. And I'm sure we all join with them with the joy of life and the thumbs up for living a good life. And I'm finishing with this. This may be one of the very last photos taken of Grandma and Grandpa. They look a bit ghostly there. But they moved to their home of retirement at Karolta Park, where they both passed away peacefully. And they erected this stone in their front garden for any passerby to see. The stone reads, "Let everything that hath breath praise the Lord. Praise ye the Lord." And I finish my speech with a quote from Psalm 145. "Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. One generation commends your works to another. They tell of your mighty acts. They speak of the glorious splendour of your majesty, and I will meditate on your wonderful works." Thank you.
Well done. I think you must all be totally inspired, not only by the story, the magnificent story that Heidi has told us about, but also by her bravery in continuing the presentation. I cannot imagine that anyone here can resist reading the book. But before we go to questions from you, I have one question. I will have to ask somebody else to see for me the answer to that question. How many of you here this evening are related to Heidi and the people that she has spoken about in this story? Two? I don't believe it. How many of you are here at a Friends of Lutheran Archives meeting for the first time? Okay, good. A special welcome to you, and we hope this won't be the last time either. And now I would ask if any of you have questions or would like to make comments. I'm not at all sure how you're going to be seen. But I'll let Ben deal with that. So if you have a question or a comment, Ben will come and bring the microphone to you.
I'm fascinated that in the camp, when they did scandaliers, wasn't it? Were there females in there, or were they just males dressed up as females? Okay, thanks.
They were all males.
What year was Wilf born?
1892.
I'm interested in your relationship with the editor. You said that Ian Harmsdorf, Hauser, you said he was very supportive, but in my experience, editors can actually be quite devastating, and I'm just wondering if you had that experience with him as well?
We developed a great relationship, and there were quite a few things that he advised me against and towards, but always in a most kindly, encouraging manner. I think I was very lucky there. Yeah, most fortunate.
Two comments. Quite a number of years ago, Carl Doehler, when he and I were on what used to be the board of Lutheran Archives, Carl showed me a photo taken at Neuendettelsau by his father John, and it was a photograph of about 7 boys around a pond of water, and they all had on those woolen bathers that were de rigueur in those days, and they were obviously horsing around having a great fun. And then I looked at the date on the photograph, and I think the date was the 2nd of August 1914, just a day or two before war was declared against Britain, and then the fortunes of all these boys would have changed irrevocably. The second comment was, Willie Reuter's nephew told me only recently, when I asked about Willie, it was Tom Reuter that I was speaking to, and Tom said that he met his uncle Willie in America when he studied over there in the 1950s. And Willie had a terrible time in Germany, and it seemed to be that his dislike of the Germans far exceeded any dislike that John Doehler or your grandfather had. And he refused to come back to Australia. He couldn't get out of Germany quick enough, and he refused to come back to Australia with the others, stayed in America because there's too many Germans here, according to Tom.
Thank you, Heidi. You've called this a novel, and yet what we've heard tonight has been very much factual. How much of it is novel and how much of it is factual?
That's a tricky question. It's very hard to say, but everything in that novel happened. And the things that I've had to flesh out as a novel, author of a novel, things like some of the detailed conversations, some of the side characters who are definitely, everything is referenced in Grandpa's letters in some way or another, but required perhaps a novelist's touch to elaborate. So if I had to do a percent, I'd say something like 85 fact, 15% novel. But a good question. Yeah. Oh, right. Any more? Looks like we're done. Oh, one more, Graham.
I'd like you to ask how many people here have had a close connection with Pastor Fritsch?
Now that is the other question, of course.
Hands up.
Hands up those who have been, for example, members in a congregation or come from the same area where he grew up. So,
Quite a few.
Quite a few. He was certainly one of those much loved pastors. So if that is the end of the questions, I would like to ask Ivan Christian to come forward, please, and thank our speaker on our behalf.
My Asian history teacher.
I was hoping you weren't in my year 10.
No.
Australia. Oh, that was terrible. My first year of teaching Australian history. So you were in Asian history.
Year 11. Much
But
more
I met Heidi when she was in year 10 in 1971. Oh, sorry. I met Heidi in 1971 when she was in year 10. I discovered that she had real heart, and Monica and I were very touched by some support she gave us during a tough time. And she was the one student who stood out as a person with love, with understanding. The person she writes about in this book is a person of heart, a person who sees inside the lives of others and does some amazing things to create harmony. He uses his background skills as a farmer to make life better for people at the hospital nursing place with the Sisters of Mercy on the farm. But he also does some amazing things in Ruhleben, which is not really a place of rest. But he sees through things, and he works for the good, and he works for love, and he speaks love and truth to power. And I think what Heidi has done is absolutely amazing. She tells this amazing story. She gives voice to her grandfather in a way that can inspire us. You're a fabulous storyteller, and you're a fabulous historian.
Thank you.
You put me to shame. And so it's so good to have read most of the book and to find that it's just so eye-opening about a period of history that most of us know nothing about. So thank you, Heidi. Thank you for sharing this story. Fabulous.
Thank you.
Ooh. The first one or the second one? Or both? Both. So one for the left hand.
Thank you very much.
And one for the right.
Thank you, Ivan.
Hey, bless you.
Thank you for those words. You mean a lot to both of you. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The pleasure is ours, I'm sure. And I hope it has been so too for the people that are not here in front of us, but we hope listening and watching elsewhere. We can't offer you the supper, but there is coffee, tea, and some biscuits available in the hall across here. On the way, of course, you will go past a table that has a pile of books waiting for purchase. And we hope that you can join us to have a chat. Well, I'm sure we have been given great food for thought and for chatting about with one another in this talk this evening. So we hope we may see you next meeting, the 27th of October, to hear the story of another great challenge and great hopes and great achievements at Hermannsburg at Fink River Mission. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you again.